Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into one of the most exciting rivalries in sports.
Yeah, this one's a classic.
India versus Pakistan in cricket.
Always a good one.
We've got two really interesting sources for this one.
Oh.
One's an article that's just packed with stats and figures,
Okay.
and the other's more of an academic deep dive into the history and politics surrounding it all.
Sounds like a good mix. So, what are we looking at here? Like, how big of a rivalry are we talking?
Well, get this. It's considered by many to be the biggest rivalry in all of sports, bigger than any of those classic matchups you can think of.
Wow. Okay. That's saying something.
And to give you an idea of the scale, over 800,000 people applied for tickets to just one India-Pakistan World Cup match back in 2019.
Seriously.
Yeah. So we'll definitely be digging into those incredible stats.
Looking forward to that.
But it's not just about the numbers. We're going to look at how wars, politics, and even something called cricket diplomacy have shaped this rivalry over the decades.
You know, it's fascinating how this rivalry goes way beyond what happens on the cricket field. It really reflects the shared history between these two nations. All the complexities and the intertwined narratives, it's all there.
Definitely. So let's start by setting the stage. Our in-depth source takes us back to 1947 and the partition of British India.
Right. A pivotal moment.
Yeah, 1 million lives were lost,
hmm
10 million people displaced. Just an immense human impact. It's hard to even grasp the scale of it.
Absolutely. And that event, with all its weight, casts a long shadow over this sporting rivalry. That shared history, with all the political friction and disputes, adds this really potent emotional charge to every match. Almost like the cricket field becomes a stage where those tensions play out, each match echoing the past in a way.
So I've always been a bit confused about the different types of cricket matches.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I know there are tests, ODIs, and T20s, but I don't really understand the distinctions.
Yeah, a lot of people get those mixed up.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels a little lost.
Not at all. It can be confusing. The simplest way to think about it is like this. Test matches are like the marathons of cricket. They're played over 5 days, so you need incredible stamina and strategic thinking. ODIs, or one-day internationals, are more like a 50-over sprint, a mix of aggression and tactics. Then there are T20s, the newest format, which are like a 20-over blast. It's all about explosive batting and taking quick wickets. Each format brings its own unique flavor to the India-Pakistan rivalry.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thanks for clearing that up.
No problem.
All right, now that we got the cricket formats down, let's get into the head-to-head stats. Our website article's got all the numbers, and I think there might be a few surprises here.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with those stats. It's always interesting to see how the historical record shapes the narrative of a rivalry.
Okay, so in test matches, Pakistan actually holds the advantage.
Really?
They have 12 wins compared to India's 9, and they also lead in ODIs with 73 wins to India's 57.
Huh. I have to admit I didn't expect that. I thought India would have the edge, especially in the longer formats.
You think so? Well, things get really interesting when you look at the T20 format. India completely dominates, with 9 wins out of their 13 encounters. And get this, India has never lost to Pakistan in a Cricket World Cup match. Ever.
Wow, an undefeated streak in World Cups. That's pretty remarkable. Definitely adds another layer to this rivalry. But, of course, we can't forget Pakistan's victory in the 2017 Champions Trophy final. That was a big one for them. It shows that anything can happen when these two teams meet, no matter the historical record.
Totally. That Champions Trophy final was intense. But speaking of history, our in-depth source really highlights how real-world events have impacted this rivalry over the years.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about wars, terrorist attacks, all these things that have forced matches to be suspended, sometimes for years at a time.
It really shows how intertwined sports and politics can be. You can't separate the game from the wider context, especially when those events directly affect the ability of these nations to even play against each other.
It's true. And then there's this concept of cricket diplomacy. I wasn't really familiar with that term before reading these sources.
Cricket diplomacy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Basically, it's the idea of using cricket matches as a way to ease tensions between the two countries.
I see. Kind of like a form of cultural exchange, where the game becomes a platform for dialogue, even at the government level.
Exactly. And our document actually gives some examples of how leaders have used these matches to try and thaw relations. Like in 1987, when Pakistan's president at the time, General Zia-ul-Haq, went to a test match in India and met with the Indian Prime Minister.
A cricket match as a catalyst for diplomacy. It really highlights the potential for sport to, at least temporarily, transcend political divides. Of course, the long-term impact is always debatable, especially given the complex political realities.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about the historical backdrop, the different types of matches, the head-to-head stats, and even touched on the political climate. But what about some of those moments that made this rivalry legendary?
Right, every big rivalry has those iconic plays and unforgettable figures.
Exactly. Well, our in-depth source talks about Anil Kumble achieving something incredible back in 1999.
Oh.
He became only the second bowler in history to take all 10 wickets in an innings against Pakistan.
Wow, that's amazing. To achieve that against your biggest rival on that kind of stage, that's got to be a career highlight.
Definitely a moment for the history books. And it's not just the players who create those legendary moments, is it?
No, you're right.
The fans are a huge part of what makes this rivalry so special.
Absolutely. The passion is just palpable. You can feel it even when you're just watching a match on TV.
It's true. Although sometimes that passion can boil over, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Our research mentions crowd disturbances, even legal action taken against fans. It's a shame when the love of the game turns into something negative like that.
It is. It's a reminder that things can go too far. Even in sport, it's a balancing act between celebrating the rivalry and making sure it stays within the bounds of sportsmanship.
Our source even mentions this crazy incident from 1991. Some political party workers in India dug up the pitch to stop a match from happening.
Seriously, they dug up the whole pitch.
Yep, talk about taking things to another level.
Wow. That really highlights how intertwined politics and national identity are with this rivalry. I mean, that's a pretty drastic step to take.
It really is. And, it's kind of mind-blowing to think that there have actually been players who've represented both India and Pakistan.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It seems impossible now, given how intense the rivalry is these days, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine that happening today.
But our document highlights 3 players who did just that: Amir Elahi, Gul Muhammad, and Abdul Hafiz Kardar. Their careers spanned a really unique period, right after the partition, when things were maybe a little less defined between the two countries.
That's so interesting. To wear the colors of both rivals, it must have been a very different experience back then.
Absolutely. It just shows how much things have changed. And one thing that's remained constant is the sheer excitement surrounding these matches.
Oh, for sure.
Our article mentions that tickets for the upcoming Champions Trophy match in Dubai sold out in minutes.
Yeah, I heard about that. People were going crazy trying to get their hands on those.
I bet. And the 2025 Champions Trophy,
Yeah.
the hype is already building. It's going to be insane.
Dubai is going to be buzzing for that one. The atmosphere in that stadium will be electric. Imagine the thousands of fans, both Indian and Pakistani, all there for the love of the game. It's about more than just the result. It's about the pride, the passion, the bragging rights.
Definitely. Okay, so we've talked about the history, the political side of things, the fans, and the sheer hype. But I think we need to come back to this idea of cricket diplomacy. It keeps popping up.
Mm.
And I'm curious about its effectiveness. Some people say it's just symbolic, a gesture without any real impact. What do you think?
That's a good question. It's true that some view it as more of a symbolic thing, just a gesture that doesn't really change anything politically. But I think it can be more than that. Think about the shared love for cricket in both countries. That alone creates a space for people to come together. It facilitates dialogue and understanding, even amidst all the political tension.
Right.
Whether it leads to actual breakthroughs, I don't know. It's debatable. But the power lies in reminding us of our shared humanity, that we have more in common than what divides us.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Maybe it's less about politics and more about those personal connections.
Yeah.
Recognizing our common ground.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe those connections built around a shared passion for cricket can eventually lead to bigger changes, a more harmonious relationship between India and Pakistan.
I like that. It's a hopeful thought.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the power of sport, right? Its ability to transcend borders.
Absolutely. And with the 2025 Champions Trophy coming up, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Will we see that unity, or will it just fuel the tension?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch. But our research also highlights some of the darker sides of this passion, right? We talked about crowd disturbances, but there was also that incident in Leicester in 2022.
Oh, right.
Clashes between fans that spilled into the streets.
Yeah, that was a tough one. It's a reminder that these events can become flashpoints, that even a game that's supposed to bring people together can sometimes make things worse.
Yeah, it's important to acknowledge that. It's a big responsibility for fans and society as a whole to make sure that passion doesn't turn into something harmful.
Absolutely. Well said.
So we've covered a lot here. The history, the political backdrop, those amazing on-field moments, and the complex relationship between the fans and the game itself.
It's a fascinating rivalry.
It really is. But there's one question that's been on my mind throughout this whole deep dive. With all this intensity in history, can this rivalry actually be a force for good? Like, can it actually help improve relations between India and Pakistan?
It's the big question, isn't it? It's something people have been debating for decades. On the one hand, you have these incredibly high-stakes matches, millions of people watching. It stirs up a lot of nationalistic feelings and often just reflects the existing political tensions.
Right.
But on the other hand, that shared love of cricket, it creates this really unique space for dialogue, for interaction, even with all that tension.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly. The challenge is harnessing that unifying power of sport while also, minimizing the risk of making things worse.
I keep thinking back to that example from 1987. The Pakistani president attending a match in India and meeting with the prime minister. It's hard to imagine that happening now.
True. The political landscape's definitely different now. Those grand gestures of diplomacy seem, I don't know, less likely these days, but I still think the potential is there, maybe just on a smaller scale.
What do you mean?
Well, think about the people-to-people interactions that happen during these matches. Fans from both countries traveling to support their teams, the friendly banter, celebrating the sport together.
Right.
All those experiences can help break down stereotypes, foster a sense of shared identity even.
So it's about shifting the focus away from the politics and toward those personal connections,
Yeah.
recognizing that we're all human, regardless of where we come from.
Exactly. And you never know, maybe those connections, built on a shared passion for cricket, can lead to wider societal shifts, a better relationship between these two nations.
I really hope so. It really highlights the power of sport, its ability to bring people together, to go beyond those boundaries.
Absolutely. And with that 2025 Champions Trophy clash coming up, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Will it make things better, or will it just fuel more tension?
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how it all unfolds, both on and off the field. But one thing's for sure. This India-Pakistan cricket rivalry is a story that's not going away anytime soon. It's a reminder of how sport, history, politics, and even the human spirit are all intertwined. What do you think out there, listener? Can a game this intense actually be a force for positive change? Or will this rivalry always reflect the divisions that exist? It's definitely something to think about as we get ready for the next chapter in this amazing story.
There's something exciting about that uncertainty, though.
Right.
Knowing that anything can happen when these two teams meet, it keeps us on the edge of our seats, reminds us that the story is far from over.
It's been an awesome deep dive into one of the greatest rivalries in sports. We've gone through the history, looked at the politics, and witnessed the highs and lows of this clash of titans. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the India-Pakistan cricket rivalry. Until next time, keep exploring those fascinating stories that are all around us.